Do you worry that your party could leave here complacent?
Oh, I don't worry about complacency at all. We're going to have to go out and win this. We're going to have to go out and earn this. I do think it is the unity and excitement inside that building is extraordinary. I think our job is to make sure that, we're bringing the rest of the country along with this chance for America to turn the page. And that's what I think people want to do. So I believe we're going to be pushing on an open door there, but we've got to work. We can't take a single vote for granted.
Well, last evening we heard from Governor Tim Walz, Senator, the big introductory speech as he accepted the nomination. We're still hearing as Democrats frame him as the coach turned teacher and National Guardsman before he ever got into politics. Republicans are saying that he's a case of stolen valor, that he abandoned his brothers in arms before they were deployed to a foreign country. Should he be responding more forcefully to that?
I think that Tim Walz did an amazing job last night at this place to reflect the Midwestern values that he grew up with and that he has tried to transmit to his students through the distinguished career that he has had, both in public service and in the military. And I expect over the next few days, we're going to learn more and more and more about that record, and that's going to be positive, not negative for Tim Walz. It was a breath of fresh air, take it from me, from somebody who comes from the middle of the country, to hear somebody from the middle of the country on a national ticket. I'm just very, very gratified about that.
Well, Senator, of course, it wasn't just Tim Walz we heard from last night. We also heard from former President Bill Clinton, who talked specifically about foreign policy during the Trump administration. I'll remind you, sir, of what the former president said.
President Trump said nobody respected America anymore like they did when he was president. With a straight face, he cited as evidence of the respect that existed for us when he was there the presidents of North Korea and Russia. I'd rather have the people who respect us now.
Senator, we speak with you frequently on this program about foreign policy, and obviously Kamala Harris has had the ability to be vice president for 3.5 years now, has had a front row seat to many foreign policy decisions. To what extent does she need to lean on that experience tonight to draw a contrast with Donald Trump?
I don't know whether she's got to do it tonight, but I think she's going to have an amazing opportunity to draw a contrast with Donald Trump in the coming, few weeks, because the Biden administration, I give Joe Biden enormous credit for this, with Vice President Harris's help. Has done an extraordinary job putting together the coalition that has supported Ukraine in its battle against the tyranny that Vladimir Putin represents. I think that it's pretty clear that Donald Trump would have tossed the keys of Ukraine to Vladimir Putin at the first chance that he got. That's what he says. That's not what I'm saying. And instead, what we've been able to do is rebuild the coalition that was so important to us during the Cold War. We've had countries from all over Europe and Southeast Asia even joining that coalition against that aggression. Xi Jinping has had to think 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 times about whether he's going to invade Taiwan, because he now has seen the free world organize themselves under the leadership, or at least with the leadership of the United States. And it's a reminder that the U.S. really is the world's essential nation when it comes to protecting democracy and protecting freedom and protecting freedom. And I think that's what Bill Clinton is talking about. When Donald Trump was in power, he was coddling tyrants like Putin and like the leader of North Korea, sending him love letters and turning it into a big joke. There's nothing that's a joke about the nuclear arsenal that North Korea has. There's nothing a joke about the alliances that we've been able to rebuild since he shattered them when he was president of the United States, there's going to be a very clear distinction going in this election about our foreign policy versus, frankly, not the Republicans' foreign policy, because it is not even a Republican foreign policy. It's Donald Trump's own weird, crazy foreign policy.
I heard that weird a couple times this week, Senator, but I want to ask you, what happened to the protesters? We were told, and I bet you were warned, that tens of thousands would be here, angry about Israel policy, pro-Palestinian protesters that simply haven't materialized in the way a lot of the folks suggested. Is that because progressive Democrats believe that Kamala Harris will be harder on Benjamin Netanyahu than Joe Biden?
I think it's because the party has unified, because we know how important this election is. I mean, America is going to face, this isn't just a political choice, we're going to be facing a moral choice in November, and it's critically important, and I think as a result of that, we are unified. That doesn't mean there isn't disagreement in our country or in even the Democratic Party about what should happen in the Middle East, and I believe very strongly that we have got to get to a place where we're beginning to work with the parties there to negotiate a two-state solution that plausibly can allow people to have a more peaceful next half century than the one that has come before us. But that, and I think it's important for us to recognize that only the United States can really help broker that from here, which is just another reason why it matters who's our president.